On his knees, he finds that spot under the desk. It looks like that's where the mouse is, but he also notices that the floorboards are not laid properly. Well, the fact is, hello, welcome to another episode of Criminal Patrol. It's a small town. I don't think there are even 100 residents there, not far from Wrocław, about 80 kilometers from Wrocław. Agnieszka lived there, a young girl, just 23 years old. Agnieszka enjoyed life. She liked parties. She liked all kinds of fun going out. Her parents probably understood a bit that youth needs to have fun, but on the other hand, they could also count on their daughter. They also thought that at some point the partying would probably come to an end. She would meet some guy, have a child, they would live together, and they could simply count on her. It also happened that Agnieszka didn't come home for the night. On November 12th, 2010, Agnieszka and her mom were cooking something. They simply ran out of sugar, and Agnieszka said she would go to the store to buy some. That's exactly what happened. She got dressed and left, but she didn't come back. It went on for quite a while, and on one hand her parents were a bit worried because she suddenly left, was supposed to come back after buying sugar, but she didn't return and didn't say anything. On the other hand, they also knew that these kinds of things happened before, like her disappearing somewhere or spending the night somewhere, and they suspected that there was some boy behind it. It happened before, so they were in a kind of dilemma. First, they went to the store and asked, but it turned out that Agnieszka wasn't there. They got a bit worried, and then the mother received a text message. It was Agnieszka who wrote it. Agnieszka wrote, "Mom, I'm pregnant. I'm going to live with my boyfriend now, and I won't be coming back to Lechitowo." It was a bit strange, but on the other hand, it was possible. Maybe she was ashamed of the pregnancy, maybe she didn't want to. Well, they decided it was simply their daughter's choice.
Watch special episodes as well as regular episodes without ads on Hero Hero Criminal Patrol.
In the same town lived Dominik, a 28-year-old guy who was already married. His wife, Justyna, was 25 and they had a child, a 3-year-old boy. They lived in an old German tenement house, and at the same time, Justyna's parents lived in the same building. When you have a small child, having the grandparents nearby in the same building is really a big blessing. Justyna could count mainly on her grandmother, on her mother, and since it was the same building, so it was obvious that her mother was practically with them all the time, either dropping by, taking care of the child, helping with cooking, or helping with cleaning. And Justyna and her mother also had a really good relationship. They often sat down, talked, and confided all kinds of secrets to each other. Basically, you could say that Justyna's mother was in that apartment all the time. Dominik's family was considered a normal, happy family, I would say. Justyna was seen as a mother who took care of her child and looked after the home. Dominik was seen as someone who was a good husband. He was considered a so-called handyman. He could do everything, fix anything. And it also seems that the neighbors and people who looked at them from the outside were a bit jealous of Justyna for having such a good husband. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he can fix anything, he's considered to be well balanced. In Dominik's case, that's probably a good sign too, because he was very precise in everything he did. He wouldn't leave something he was fixing or working on until he was satisfied with it. People would often tell him, "Dominik, just leave it, it's really fine, it looks good." Something kept bothering him, he kept fixing things, kept adjusting and fitting different parts until he finally liked it. It seems that for a person like that who does all kinds of work, that's actually an advantage, not a flaw. Maybe that also carried over a bit into everyday life, because if something was put in one place, that's where it was supposed to stay and that was its place. It couldn't be moved. For example, a cup or a plate. That could have been a kind of flaw, but as a rule, Dominik's precision in what he did was really noticeable. Dominik also renovated the house himself. It was the nicest house in the area, so there was also some envy from the neighbors. Basically, they had no complaints about him. Maybe two things. When he greeted someone, he didn't look them in the eye as if he had something to hide. He was a bit strange. Secondly, the neighbors thought so too. It's a bit strange that Justyna never left him alone with their little child, that even if she went out for just a moment, she would ask for help from either her mother or a neighbor, and Dominik was never left alone with the little boy. It's also hard to say why. Some people said maybe she was just afraid that something might happen, that he's an inexperienced father. Others said he just didn't have time. But nobody really looked into it. Nobody tried to find out why it was like that. It's been almost exactly a month since Agnieszka disappeared, the Agnieszka who went out to buy sugar. December 13th. Justyna's mom goes out to the bus to buy bread. Well, in some places there are these buses, vans that drive around the village and sell basic goods. Well, no one is going to travel far to a store just to buy a loaf of bread or some sugar. So Justyna's mom simply went to one of those vans, bought some bread, and was coming back home with that fresh loaf of bread. In front of the house, in front of that tenement, she meets her son-in-law. Well, you can see that he's kind of devastated, that he's going through something. She asked him what happened, and that's when she found out that Justyna, her daughter, Dominik's wife, had left. What do you mean she left so suddenly? Well, the mother and daughter talked the previous evening. There was no indication that she wanted to make such a radical decision and leave her husband's home. To which Dominik said that he found correspondence between Justyna and her lover on her phone. Well, when he showed her what he had found, she decided to risk everything. And she was supposed to tell him that since he found out, she's just leaving him, she's leaving him, and she'll live with her lover. Of course, for Mom it was a shock. She didn't know anything about any lover. She didn't suspect anything, nor did she feel anything as a mother. And it was really a huge surprise for her. Dominik also showed her a text message from his wife, from Justyna. In that text message, she wrote that she was leaving, that she would live with her lover, and that now he should take care of the house and their little son. Justyna's mother shared this information with the other family members, with her husband, with her sister-in-law, with Justyna's brother. They sat down and started to think, because it's almost impossible that Justyna would leave home like that. Somewhere out there trying to start a life with a new lover, they knew that here in the family, between Dominik and Justyna, well, it wasn't always good. There were some arguments, there were quarrels, because after all, they lived in the same apartment building, so they could hear the sounds of those fights. The daughter also mentioned that sometimes it's not cheerful. Well, they knew about all of this, but of course there's a long way from such arguments to actually leaving home. The atmosphere became, I would say, very tense. Also, my sister-in-law and my mother were walking around the house in the rooms where Justyna lived. At some point, even my sister-in-law noticed a blood stain on the sink. She made a fuss. Dominika, in charge, demanded to know if the blood was real and where it came from. It turned out, at least that's what he said, it was the father-in-law. He confirmed that he cut himself while peeling an onion and just came to wash his hands, that cut finger, but the situation was tense. Mom insisted, however, that there was no other option. We had to notify the police because this wasn't a normal disappearance. And as she was leaving, she received a text message on her phone, and she saw that it was a message from her daughter. Justyna. Justyna wrote in that text message, "Mom, don't look for me. I have a request. Please take care of Camila in the house." And more or less the same message was sent to her sister-in-law and her father. On one hand, their daughter was missing, but on the other hand, everyone received a text message, so they were relieved that Justyna was alive, that she was somewhere. They even tried to call her right away, dialing her number, but Justyna didn't answer their calls. The following days began. Little Kamilek, Justyna's child, missed her very much and kept asking where his mom was when Mrs. Christina, Justyna's mom, would come back. Her heart was breaking because she could see that her grandson missed her very much. She decided that maybe it would be good in this situation if she slept with little Kamilek, that this would make the boy miss his mom less and stop calling for her. But of course, she was very worried about all of this. She felt sorry for her grandson, and she also didn't know what was happening with Justyna. Damien did go to the police and reported that his wife had disappeared, that she was gone, but he also said it in such a way that basically his wife had left, packed her things, left with her lover, that she was sending text messages showing that she was alive and that she was probably starting a new life somewhere. Dominik himself wasn't really interested in his son, only taking care of him when he absolutely had to, because his mother-in-law was doing something there. So then he would sit with him on the couch, turn on some cartoon for his son to watch, and he would either eat or write something. On the phone, his mother-in-law also noticed that for some time now, which probably annoyed her, he had been using all kinds of scented candles. Basically, it's not clear why it bothered her. She figured that maybe her son-in-law just has such preferences and likes that kind of scent. The mother-in-law, Mrs. Christina, was basically at her daughter's apartment all the time by then, constantly racking her brain and trying to figure out what could have happened. Kind of just to satisfy her curiosity. She also started checking on her daughter's things. Well, first, she noticed that her daughter didn't take her glasses, which was strange because she used those glasses every day and needed them. Then she realized that she didn't take her contraceptives. Well, since she started a life with a new lover, it was probably her decision, but she also knew that her daughter didn't want to have more children, at least for now. It was already December and her daughter only took a few summer dresses which are not suitable for the season at all. She also had access to her account, and that's when she realized that all the money had disappeared from her account. Well, she started to wonder why her daughter left all those things behind. That was also kind of mysterious to her. It kept bothering her. And it clearly indicated that her daughter's disappearance wasn't the way her son-in-law was trying to describe it to them. Miss Christina, she hoped, like many people who are waiting for their missing loved ones, that her daughter might come back for Christmas. but Justyna didn't come back. However, she kept sending her text messages all the time, and in those messages she wrote that everything was fine and not to look for her. And again, the other way around, when they wanted to call her, she wouldn't answer their calls. But the family thought or wanted to believe that Justyna was alive. She just didn't want to talk to them. And so another 2 months passed. As you remember, Christina sleeps with Camille at that time, staying with her grandson at night. It starts to annoy her that for several months now, she's been hearing what sounds like a mouse nesting somewhere under the floor in that room. She clearly hears scratching noises, and it irritates her. She can't sleep because of it, and she's also afraid that her grandson will wake up. She starts looking for the place where the mouse could have nested, walking around the room. Basically, the tracks lead under the desk. On her knees, she finds the spot under the desk, and it looks like that's where the mouse is. But she also notices that the floorboards are not laid properly. Well, the fact is that her son-in-law recently did some renovations there. But you also remember I mentioned earlier that Dominik was very meticulous. It was almost impossible for him to leave the floorboards like that, as if he wouldn't connect them or glue them properly. And it looked like that. It looked terrible considering his work. Mrs. Christina, probably not feeling or being afraid of what she might find under the floor, didn't decide to pull up the boards. Something told her that she might see something there that would simply terrify her. She somehow made it through the night, and in the morning she called her daughter-in-law, who came over. Both women entered the room, stood by the desk, looked at the floor, and didn't know what to do, whether to pull up the floorboards or not. Should they call Mrs. Christina's son? Maybe he could help. And while they were discussing it, they stood in the room. Dominik came in, looked at them, then went over to his son, kissed him, wrote something else on a piece of paper, and left the house. Even then, when Dominik left the house like that, he was convinced that they would actually find what they were thinking about there, which was simply Justyna dead. They also called Mrs. Christina's son. He called the police, and an investigative team arrived. They told them everything. They talked about their suspicions. The police officers started tearing up the floor, the boards, the panels. It was panels. They started tearing up those panels, and when they removed them, indeed, between the joists, they found Justyna's body. The body was wedged so tightly between the joists, and on top of it were her dresses, the clothes she had supposedly taken with her. Justyna's body was transported to the Department of Forensic Medicine. The autopsy revealed that Justyna was murdered, that she was struck several times on the head, presumably with a hammer. A dozen hours later, Dominik wrote to his sister-in-law, "I love you and I'm sorry for everything." He still had the courage to call home. During that brief conversation, he said it. He admitted that he really did kill Justyna. From that conversation, it seemed that he intended to commit suicide, that he wanted to leave a farewell letter. In that farewell letter, he would explain everything, tell everything, why he killed Justyna. The police quickly organized a blockade. The search began, but the police were unable to catch him. Dominik wasn't caught because he didn't have enough courage to end his own life, to commit suicide. He simply came and turned himself in at the police station. Things weren't going well at Dominik and Justina's home. There had been arguments for a long time, very tense arguments with a lot of grievances. Justina suspected or even knew that Dominik had a lover for some time. It's a small town, everyone knows each other, so she probably knew that the lover was Agnieszka. This is the same Agnieszka who went out for sugar a month earlier. Dominik decided to resolve some situation. On November 12th, he was waiting in his car outside Agnieszka's house, his lover. It also can't be ruled out, and probably was the case, that Agnieszka was blackmailing him in some way. She told him to choose between her and his wife, but more likely her, because she probably told him at that time that she was pregnant. Dominik was waiting for her in the car, and when she came out, he hit her with a tire iron, then took her to a remote place, hid her under the floor mat, and left the body there. The police later found that body. It turned out that just like Justyna, she died from blows with that tire iron. When she left, he concluded that Justyna's wife was also somehow getting in his way, so he decided to get rid of her too. When she came out of the bathroom, he hit her several times with a hammer and then pushed her body under the floor beneath the panels. He did it while his 3-year-old son was sleeping next to him on the bed. He didn't think it would ever work. He thought that this way he would take care of the whole matter. Of course, he had the phone numbers of both women, his lover and his wife. From those phones, he sent comforting or rather reassuring text messages to the family, suggesting that both women were alive. Presumably under the influence of emotions. The fact that he had to act quickly, still in the dark, his meticulousness failed him, and he didn't connect the panels as precisely as he usually did. That's why the mother-in-law found the place where her daughter's body was hidden. Dominik got life imprisonment for double murder. Honestly, I would say that for him, 12 was unlucky in some way. On November 12th, he killed Agnieszka. On December 12th, he killed his wife, Justyna. And on November 12th, 2 years after he killed Agnieszka, he was sentenced. A life sentence with the possibility of parole after 35 years. But we also have to remember that when Dominik killed for the first time, he decided that this was how he would solve his problems. And it seems that he's a man without a wife, without any sense of empathy, a man who, if he got away with it, would probably keep killing. So it's not out of the question that even if in 30 or 5 years he applies for early release, he will end up in a facility for beasts. Because it seems that he is a dangerous man, and he will be a dangerous man for the rest of his life. And then he would be, so to speak, only 63 years old, and that's the whole story. Of course, subscribe to our channel, and as always, take care.
Watch special episodes as well as regular episodes without ads on Hiro Hiro Kokriminalny Patrol.